What if I told you that everything your pastor taught you about God was keeping you powerless? That the very beliefs designed to bring you closer to divine truth were actually creating separation? Joel Goldsmith discovered this shocking reality after years as a devoted Christian who found traditional teachings left him spiritually empty and desperate for real connection. The revolutionary mystic who transformed thousands of lives worldwide made a startling declaration that would shake the foundations of conventional Christianity. He proclaimed that most religious teachings about God create the very problems they claim to solve. Instead of bringing us closer to the divine, they build walls of separation, guilt, and powerlessness. Goldsmith's breakthrough came during his darkest hour, when traditional prayers failed him completely. In that moment of spiritual crisis, he discovered a truth so profound it would revolutionize his understanding of God forever. This wasn't the distant, judgmental deity of conventional religion, but an intimate, ever-present reality that required no intermediaries. This ancient secret, hidden in plain sight within Scripture itself, reveals why your prayers might feel unanswered and why spiritual breakthrough seems so elusive. Tonight, you'll discover the shocking truth that could transform your entire relationship with the divine and unleash your natural healing power. Traditional Christianity teaches you to worship a God who is separate from you, somewhere out there in heaven, judging your every move. This fundamental misconception creates the very sense of separation and unworthiness that keeps you from experiencing divine power. Goldsmith realized this external God concept was the root of spiritual impotence. When you pray to a distant deity, begging for help from outside yourself, you're actually affirming your separation from divine power. Every plea to an external God reinforces the belief that you are alone, powerless, and dependent on something beyond your reach. This creates a cycle of spiritual dependency that traditional religion perpetuates. The shocking truth Goldsmith discovered is that God is not separate from you, but is the very consciousness by which you know yourself. This isn't blasphemy, but the deepest Christian mystical teaching. When Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you, he wasn't speaking metaphorically, but revealing the literal location of divine presence. Your pastor never told you this because the institutional church requires your dependence to maintain control. When you discover that divine consciousness is your own true nature, you no longer need intermediaries, rituals, or external validation. You become spiritually self-sufficient and divinely empowered. The lie goes deeper than you imagine. You've been taught that you're a sinner in need of salvation from outside yourself. This fundamental belief in your inherent unworthiness creates a spiritual wound that no amount of prayer or religious activity can heal. Goldsmith saw how this teaching destroys the very foundation of spiritual power. This doctrine of original sin isn't just wrong, it's spiritually destructive. When you believe you're fundamentally flawed and separated from God, you can never access the divine power that is your birthright. You remain forever dependent on external sources for what is already present within your own consciousness. The truth that will liberate you is this: you are not a sinner seeking God. You are divine consciousness temporarily forgetting its true nature. Every spiritual practice that reinforces your sense of unworthiness moves you further from the power you seek. Recognition of your divine nature is the key to instant spiritual transformation. Goldsmith proved this truth through miraculous healings that came not through begging God for help, but through the recognition of divine presence as one's own consciousness. When you stop seeing yourself as separate from divine power, that power flows through you naturally and effortlessly. Here's the secret your religious leaders don't want you to discover. Prayer doesn't work the way you've been taught. Petitionary prayer, asking God to change circumstances, actually reinforces the belief that God is separate from you and that your current experience is somehow outside divine will. This creates resistance to the very help you seek. True prayer, according to Goldsmith's revolutionary method, isn't asking for anything. It's the recognition and acknowledgement of divine presence already operating in your experience. Instead of begging for healing, you recognize the perfect wholeness that is your true nature. This recognition doesn't create healing. It reveals the healing that already exists. When you pray from recognition rather than petition, miracles happen naturally. You're not trying to convince God to help you. You're simply acknowledging the divine perfection that is always present. This shift in consciousness, from petition to recognition, is the master key that unlocks infinite spiritual power. The technique is simple but revolutionary. Instead of asking God to heal your condition, you silently recognize, the divine perfection of my being is already present and active. This isn't positive thinking. It's the recognition of spiritual truth that instantly aligns you with divine power and opens the door to miraculous transformation. Sarah Mitchell was a devout church member for 37 years who followed every religious prescription perfectly. She attended services religiously, tithed faithfully, and prayed daily according to traditional methods. Yet when she faced a devastating health crisis, her conventional prayers seemed to bounce off heaven's closed doors, leaving her feeling abandoned by the God she had served so devotedly. Desperate and spiritually exhausted, Sarah discovered Goldsmith's teachings and reluctantly tried his recognition method. Instead of begging God to heal her condition, she began each prayer session with the simple recognition that divine wholeness was already present as her true nature. The shift felt awkward at first, contradicting everything she had learned. Within 3 weeks of practicing recognition instead of petition, Sarah experienced her first breakthrough. The chronic pain that had plagued her for months began subsiding. More importantly, she felt a profound sense of spiritual connection she had never experienced in decades of traditional worship. The divine presence she had sought externally was revealing itself as her own deepest nature. 6 months later, Sarah's complete physical healing astonished her doctors. But the greater miracle was her transformed relationship with divine presence. No longer dependent on external religious structures, she had discovered the direct access to divine power that had always been present within her own consciousness. Michael Chen spent 15 years as a struggling seminary student turned pastor, faithfully teaching doctrines that increasingly felt hollow to his own experience. He preached about God's love while battling depression and financial crisis that traditional prayers couldn't touch. His congregation looked to him for spiritual guidance he couldn't provide for himself. The breaking point came during a particularly dark season when multiple family crises overwhelmed his faith. Traditional prayer methods that he taught others failed him completely. Discovering Goldsmith's work felt like finding water in a spiritual desert. The recognition method seemed too simple, even heretical, but desperation made him receptive to radical truth. Michael began practicing the recognition of divine presence as his own consciousness, rather than as something external to petition. The transformation was gradual but profound. His depression lifted as he recognized the divine joy that was his natural state. Financial problems resolved as he stopped fearing lack and began recognizing divine abundance as ever-present. Today, Michael teaches a transformed Christianity that emphasizes direct spiritual experience over doctrinal belief. His congregation has tripled as people hungry for real spiritual power discover the difference between religious activity and authentic divine connection. The recognition method became his pathway from spiritual emptiness to divine fulfillment. Dr. Rebecca Torres was a respected theologian who had spent decades studying scripture academically while remaining spiritually unfulfilled. Her extensive knowledge of religious doctrine couldn't bridge the gap between intellectual understanding and authentic divine experience. She knew about God but had never directly encountered divine presence in transformative ways. When a personal crisis shattered her carefully constructed theological worldview, traditional faith offered no real comfort. Discovering Goldsmith's teachings felt like intellectual suicide, but spiritual necessity. The recognition method challenged everything she had been taught about proper relationship with the divine, yet her desperation made her willing to experiment. The first breakthrough came during a particularly difficult meditation, when instead of asking for divine help, she simply recognized divine presence as already active in her experience. The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. The peace she had sought through years of religious study became immediately present through simple recognition of what was already there. Within months, Rebecca's entire approach to spirituality transformed. Her academic knowledge became a foundation for direct experience rather than a substitute for it. She now teaches others that the kingdom of heaven isn't a future destination, but a present reality accessible through recognition of divine consciousness as our true nature. The evidence is overwhelming. Thousands have discovered that recognition prayer produces results that petitionary prayer never could. The difference isn't in the technique, but in the understanding. When you recognize divine presence as already active rather than asking for divine intervention, you align with spiritual law instead of fighting against it. These transformations happen because recognition prayer works with divine law rather than against it. Divine perfection is always present and active. Petitionary prayer suggests something is wrong that needs fixing. Recognition prayer acknowledges what is already perfect. This alignment with truth unleashes the very power you've been seeking through struggle. The shocking truth is that God was never withholding anything from you. Your own misconceptions about divine nature and your relationship to it created the very barriers you've been trying to overcome through traditional religious methods. Recognition dissolves these barriers instantly by revealing they never really existed. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these life-changing teachings. Subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom that breaks religious limitations. And comment, which breakthrough resonated most deeply with your spiritual journey? Beyond prayer, Goldsmith revealed another shocking lie that keeps you spiritually powerless. You've been taught that spiritual growth is a long, difficult process requiring years of discipline and struggle. This belief in spiritual limitation creates the very difficulties it describes. True spiritual development isn't earned through effort, but revealed through understanding. The technique Goldsmith called contemplative meditation reverses everything you've learned about spiritual practice. Instead of trying to become spiritual, you recognize the spiritual nature you already possess. Instead of working to develop divine qualities, you acknowledge the divine qualities already present as your true nature. This isn't passive wishful thinking, but active recognition of present spiritual reality. When you contemplate your divine nature rather than your human limitations, divine qualities naturally emerge in your experience. Love, wisdom, and power aren't qualities you must develop but attributes of consciousness you already possess. Practice this revolutionary technique. Set aside 15 minutes daily to contemplate this truth. I am divine consciousness expressing in human form. Don't try to feel spiritual or achieve any particular state. Simply recognize this truth about your nature and allow divine qualities to reveal themselves naturally. Traditional Christianity teaches you to struggle against sin and temptation through willpower and religious discipline. This approach creates the very internal conflict it claims to resolve. Fighting against unwanted behaviors or thoughts actually strengthens them by giving them your focused attention and emotional energy. Goldsmith discovered a completely different approach. The secret is spiritual substitution, not spiritual warfare. Instead of fighting negative patterns, you simply recognize positive spiritual truths about your nature. When tempted toward fear, recognize your divine fearlessness. When pulled toward anger, acknowledge the divine love that is your true nature. This isn't denial, but recognition of deeper truth. This method works because consciousness cannot hold contradictory ideas simultaneously. When you fully recognize your divine nature, human limitations cannot coexist in the same mental space. The negative patterns dissolve not through struggle, but through the recognition of incompatible spiritual truth. Try this when facing any unwanted impulse or emotion. Pause and silently recognize the opposite divine quality as your true nature. Don't fight the negative, simply acknowledge the positive spiritual truth about yourself. Watch how recognition of your divine nature automatically dissolves human limitations without struggle or effort. Another devastating lie you've been taught is that divine healing requires special faith, worthiness, or spiritual development. This belief makes healing seem rare and dependent on your personal spiritual achievement. Goldsmith proved that divine healing is natural law operating whenever spiritual understanding is present, regardless of your religious history or worthiness. Healing doesn't come from convincing God to help you, but from recognizing divine wholeness as already present and active. Your body is the physical expression of divine consciousness, and consciousness is always perfect and complete. Illness appears when you forget this truth. Healing appears when you remember it. The healing recognition is beautifully simple. Divine wholeness is the only reality of my being. This isn't an affirmation trying to create something new, but recognition of what already exists. Your true nature as divine consciousness has never been ill, injured, or imperfect. Physical healing reveals this eternal spiritual truth. Practice healing recognition daily, not just during illness. Spend 5 minutes acknowledging divine wholeness as your true nature. This isn't about changing your body, but recognizing the spiritual truth about your being. As this recognition deepens, your physical experience increasingly reflects your perfect spiritual nature. The final complementary technique Goldsmith taught is the recognition of divine supply. Traditional religion often promotes a poverty consciousness, teaching that spiritual people should be humble and materially modest. This creates artificial separation between spiritual development and abundant living. Divine consciousness lacks nothing and expresses through infinite abundance. Your financial struggles aren't divine will or spiritual tests, but the result of believing in limitation rather than recognizing infinite divine supply. God doesn't withhold abundance from anyone, but expresses through unlimited channels when recognized and acknowledged. Poverty consciousness blocks the natural flow of divine abundance. The recognition of divine supply begins with acknowledging this truth. Divine abundance is the nature of my being and flows through me naturally. This isn't greed or materialism, but recognition of spiritual law. Divine consciousness expresses through infinite forms of good, including the material resources needed for comfortable, generous living. Daily practice this recognition. Divine abundance flows through me now as my natural inheritance. Don't focus on specific needs or amounts, but acknowledge infinite supply as your spiritual birthright. Watch how recognition of abundant consciousness attracts the resources needed for your highest good and greatest service. The first major obstacle you'll face is religious guilt. Everything you've learned about proper relationship with God will resist these recognition methods. Your religious conditioning will whisper that acknowledging your divine nature is prideful or blasphemous. This guilt can stop your spiritual progress before it truly begins. Understand that this guilt is programmed religious conditioning, not divine truth. Jesus himself taught that you are God's and that greater works than his would you do. The recognition of your divine nature isn't ego inflation, but spiritual truth. Religious systems benefit from your spiritual dependency and will resist your direct access to divine power. When guilt arises, recognize it as evidence that you're breaking free from limiting religious programming. Don't fight the guilt, but acknowledge it as part of the process. Then return to the recognition of your divine nature with even greater determination. Your spiritual freedom depends on transcending these conditioned responses. Practice this when religious guilt attacks. This guilt is human conditioning, not divine truth. My divine nature is my spiritual inheritance, and recognizing it honors the God who created me as divine consciousness. Use guilt as a signal to deepen your recognition rather than abandon it. The second challenge is inconsistent results. Recognition prayer and contemplative meditation produce profound results, but not always immediately or in expected ways. Your human mind wants predictable, instant transformation. When results don't match expectations, doubt can undermine your spiritual progress and pull you back to familiar but ineffective methods. Divine law operates according to spiritual timing, not human impatience. Sometimes recognition produces instant healing or breakthrough. Sometimes the transformation is gradual and subtle. Sometimes divine wisdom reveals better solutions than your human mind imagined. Trust the process even when results don't match your timeline or expectations. The key is persistent recognition regardless of visible results. Every moment of acknowledging your divine nature builds spiritual momentum even when you can't see immediate effects. Like a seed growing underground before breaking through soil, spiritual recognition works invisibly before producing visible transformation. Maintain your practice during these challenging periods. Divine truth is working perfectly, even when I cannot see immediate results. My recognition of spiritual truth is never wasted and always produces divine outcomes in perfect timing. Continue recognizing your divine nature regardless of appearances. The third obstacle is social resistance from family, friends, and religious communities who feel threatened by your spiritual independence. When you stop depending on external religious authorities and discover direct access to divine power, others may react with concern, criticism, or rejection. This social pressure can be overwhelming. Remember that their resistance comes from their own spiritual insecurity and religious conditioning. When you demonstrate spiritual freedom and power, it challenges their beliefs about necessary religious dependency. Their criticism isn't about your spiritual path, but their fear of abandoning familiar limitations for unknown spiritual possibilities. Don't argue or try to convince others of these truths. Live the results quietly and allow your transformed life to speak for itself. Some people will be inspired by your example and ask about your spiritual practices. Others will remain committed to traditional limitations. Both responses are perfect for their spiritual journey. Handle social resistance with compassion. Their resistance to my spiritual freedom reflects their own spiritual conditioning. I honor their path while remaining faithful to my direct experience of divine truth. Love them without needing their approval or understanding of your spiritual choices. The final challenge is spiritual plateau, where recognition methods that once produced breakthrough results seem to lose their effectiveness. This happens when the techniques become routine rather than living recognition of present truth. The solution isn't changing methods, but deepening your understanding of their spiritual foundation. Recognition isn't about repeating words or following spiritual formulas, but awakening to present spiritual reality. When the methods feel stale, you've probably shifted from genuine recognition to mechanical repetition. Return to the fresh wonder of discovering your divine nature. Each recognition should feel like a new spiritual discovery. Also recognize that apparent plateaus often precede major breakthroughs. Your consciousness is integrating previous revelations and preparing for deeper spiritual understanding. Don't abandon proven methods during these periods, but persevere with renewed commitment to genuine recognition of spiritual truth. Revitalize your practice during plateaus. Each recognition of my divine nature is a fresh discovery of eternal spiritual truth. I approach spiritual practice with beginner's mind and wonder, allowing divine consciousness to reveal new depths of its infinite nature through my recognition. If these obstacle-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this transformative content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices that transcend religious limitations, and comment. Which challenge are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to live in constant recognition of divine presence operating through every moment of daily experience. This isn't about perfect spiritual behavior, but consistent awareness of spiritual truth underlying all appearances. Goldsmith called this practicing the presence, and it transforms ordinary life into continuous divine communion. Begin by recognizing divine intelligence operating through routine decisions. When choosing what to eat, wear, or say, silently acknowledge divine wisdom guiding your choices. This isn't about making perfect decisions, but recognizing the divine intelligence already operating through your consciousness, even in mundane matters. Extend this recognition to challenging situations. When facing difficult people or circumstances, recognize divine love operating through the experience to reveal spiritual growth opportunities. This doesn't mean accepting inappropriate behavior, but seeing spiritual purpose in all experiences that come into your life. Advanced recognition means living from divine perspective rather than human reaction. In traffic delays, recognize divine timing. In financial pressures, recognize divine supply. In health concerns, recognize divine wholeness. This consistent recognition gradually shifts your entire life experience from human struggle to divine unfolding. The most advanced application is recognizing divine perfection operating through other people, especially those who seem most challenging or unspiritual. This practice dissolves personal conflicts and reveals the spiritual unity underlying human differences. Everyone expresses divine consciousness at some level, regardless of their current behavior or awareness. When someone irritates or opposes you, silently recognize, divine consciousness is the reality of this person's being. This doesn't excuse inappropriate behavior, but acknowledges spiritual truth about their essential nature. Your recognition of their divine nature often produces remarkable changes in their behavior toward you. This practice extends to global situations that disturb your peace. Instead of judging world events or political figures, recognize divine consciousness operating through all human experience to reveal spiritual lessons and growth opportunities. This spiritual perspective maintains your inner peace regardless of external chaos. Master this advanced recognition. Every person I encounter today expresses divine consciousness in unique ways. My recognition of their spiritual nature blesses both of us and contributes to the healing of human consciousness. Watch how this recognition transforms your relationships and social experiences. Professional and business applications of recognition principles produce extraordinary results in career and financial areas. Instead of competing for limited opportunities, Recognize infinite divine intelligence creating perfect avenues for your unique gifts and talents. Abundance flows through consciousness that recognizes unlimited spiritual supply. Before important meetings, presentations, or business decisions, recognize divine intelligence operating through all participants to produce mutually beneficial outcomes. This isn't about manipulating results, but acknowledging spiritual law that always seeks harmony and good for everyone involved in any situation. When facing financial pressures or career uncertainty, resist the temptation to operate from fear or limitation. Instead, recognize divine consciousness as your employer and source, expressing through human channels but never limited by them. This recognition attracts opportunities and solutions that human planning never could. Apply business recognition daily. Divine intelligence operates through my career to bless everyone involved and create abundant good for all. I am led to perfect opportunities that utilize my highest gifts in service to divine purpose. Watch how this recognition transforms your professional experience. The ultimate integration involves recognizing every area of life as spiritual practice and divine expression. Cooking, cleaning, working, and playing all become opportunities to recognize divine consciousness operating through human activity. This transforms mundane existence into continuous spiritual communion and conscious co-creation with divine will. Family relationships become especially powerful practice grounds for recognition principles. Instead of trying to change family members, recognize divine love and wisdom operating through family dynamics to teach spiritual lessons and develop divine qualities. This recognition often produces healing in relationships that seemed permanently damaged. Even sleep becomes spiritual practice when you recognize divine consciousness maintaining and restoring your being through rest. Dreams become communications from divine wisdom. Physical exercise becomes recognition of divine vitality expressing through your body. Nothing remains separate from spiritual awareness and divine communion. Live this integrated recognition. Every moment of this day offers opportunities to recognize divine consciousness operating as my life and experience. I see spiritual purpose in all activities and divine presence in all encounters. This total recognition transforms human existence into divine living. After months or years of practicing these recognition principles, you'll discover something remarkable happening. The techniques that once required conscious effort begin operating automatically. Recognition of divine presence becomes your natural response to life situations rather than something you must remember to practice. Your consciousness gradually shifts from human perspective seeking divine help to divine perspective expressing through human experience. Prayer becomes constant communion rather than scheduled activity. Spiritual truth becomes living reality rather than religious concept. This transformation happens naturally through consistent recognition practice. The most profound change is discovering that you no longer need to seek God, because divine presence reveals itself as the very consciousness by which you know yourself. The search ends not because you find God somewhere else, but because you recognize God as your own essential nature. This recognition brings tremendous freedom and responsibility. Freedom because you no longer depend on external sources for spiritual power and guidance. Responsibility because you realize your thoughts, words, and actions express divine consciousness and affect the world around you through spiritual law. The transformed life operates from completely different principles than conventional religious living. Instead of following external religious rules, you're guided by divine intelligence operating through your intuition and spiritual understanding. Instead of fearing divine judgment, you recognize divine love as the motivating force behind all true action. Relationships transform when you consistently recognize divine consciousness as the reality of everyone's being. Conflicts dissolve because you no longer take human behavior personally, but see spiritual lessons and growth opportunities in all interpersonal experiences. Love becomes natural because you recognize spiritual unity underlying human differences. Service becomes spontaneous because you recognize divine consciousness seeking expression through your unique gifts and talents. Work becomes worship because you see divine purpose in contributing your highest abilities to human good. Life becomes joyful because you recognize divine happiness as your natural state. Your transformed consciousness affects everyone around you without effort or intention. Your recognition of spiritual truth creates an atmosphere of peace and possibility that others feel even when you're not consciously trying to help them. This is how divine consciousness blesses the world through individual awakening. The ripple effects of your transformation extend far beyond your personal experience. Every person who discovers direct access to divine power through recognition becomes a light that illuminates possibilities for others trapped in religious limitation and spiritual dependency. Your freedom gives others permission to seek their own spiritual liberation. Traditional religious structures begin losing their control when people discover they don't need intermediaries to access divine presence and power. Your example demonstrates that authentic spirituality comes through direct experience rather than doctrinal belief or institutional membership. This threatens religious establishments but liberates individual consciousness. The most important contribution you make is proving that ordinary people can access extraordinary spiritual power through simple recognition of their divine nature. You don't need special education, ordination, or religious position to experience miracles and divine guidance. Recognition of spiritual truth is available to everyone immediately. Your transformed life becomes a living demonstration that Joel Goldsmith's shocking truth works in practical daily experience. Every healing, breakthrough, and blessing you experience through recognition principles proves these methods to others who desperately need spiritual solutions that actually work. The ultimate truth Joel Goldsmith revealed is this: you have never been separate from divine presence and power. The journey isn't about finding God somewhere else, but recognizing the divine consciousness that has always been your essential nature. Every spiritual practice, every moment of recognition, simply awakens you to what you have always been. Your pastor never told you this because institutional religion requires your spiritual dependency to maintain its authority and control. When you discover direct access to divine power through recognition of your own divine nature, you no longer need external religious structures, though you may choose to participate in them from freedom rather than need. The shocking truth that can transform your entire existence is beautifully simple. Divine consciousness is not separate from your consciousness, but is your consciousness knowing itself as divine. Every moment of recognizing this truth dissolves the barriers between human experience and divine power that religion has taught you are permanent and necessary. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith revelations, like this video to help others discover these life-changing truths, subscribe for more transformative teachings that break religious limitations, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new spiritual path.
Have you ever wondered why some people seem to move through life with an unshakable confidence, as if they're tapped into a source of power that most of us can't even perceive? What if I told you that the difference between living in constant struggle and experiencing effortless flow isn't about working harder, being more spiritual, or earning divine favor, but about accepting a truth so radical that it instantly transforms everything the moment you truly grasp it? What changes inside you when you finally accept that you are one with God? Not metaphorically, not poetically, but actually, literally, fundamentally, one with the divine source of all creation. This isn't just another spiritual concept to add to your collection of ideas. This is the key that unlocks a completely different way of existing in the world. Has this ever happened to you? You find yourself in prayer, speaking to God as if addressing someone far away, someone who might listen if you ask nicely enough, if you're good enough, if you deserve it. There's a desperation in that approach, isn't there? A sense of separation that colors everything about how you experience your spiritual life. But what if that entire approach is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of who you actually are? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Most of us have been taught to see ourselves as separate beings, distant from the divine, always reaching for something beyond us. We beg, we plead, we bargain with God as if negotiating with a stranger. But here's what's remarkable when you look closely at the teachings of Jesus and the great mystics throughout history. They never operated from that consciousness of separation. Jesus didn't beg. He didn't plead. He spoke with absolute certainty, with unwavering confidence, not because he was special or different from you, but because he understood something about his relationship with the divine that most people miss entirely. When you truly accept your oneness with God, not just intellectually agree with it, but accept it at the core of your being, something instant happens. Your entire relationship with prayer transforms in a single moment. The desperation dissolves. The sense of reaching for something outside yourself disappears. You stop approaching the divine like an orphan begging for scraps and start recognizing what has always been true, that the divine life flowing through all of creation is the same life flowing through you right now. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely shift how you understand your own spiritual power and your place in this universe. This isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what you've always been, but never fully accepted. And once this recognition takes root in your consciousness, everything changes. Your prayers, your problems, your entire experience of being alive. The question isn't whether this truth is real. The question is, are you ready to accept it? Here's the thing that most spiritual teachings get backwards. They tell you that divine nature is something you need to acquire, something distant that requires years of meditation, discipline, and spiritual practice to finally reach. But that entire approach is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what you actually are. The divine nature isn't something external to you that you're trying to connect with through effort and striving. It's your original nature, the truth of who you've always been beneath all the layers of conditioning and false beliefs about yourself. Think about it this way. Before anyone told you that you were limited, before society programmed you to see yourself as separate and small, before you learned to doubt your own worth, what were you? You were pure consciousness, pure awareness, pure being. That hasn't changed. It's just been covered over by years of being told a different story about who you are. The journey isn't about becoming something new. It's about removing the layers of false identity that have hidden your true nature from yourself. When this recognition truly lands in your consciousness, something profound happens to your spiritual practice. Your prayers completely transform. Instead of desperate pleas reaching out to some distant deity, prayer becomes a recognition of what's already present. It's no longer about striving to achieve some elevated state. It becomes about allowing the divine nature that's always been there to express freely through your life. This is the hidden truth behind every authentic spiritual transformation throughout history. It's not about addition, it's about subtraction. Not about gaining something you lack, but about removing what obscures what you've always possessed. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation because what I'm about to share shifts everything about how you understand your relationship with the divine source. You are not a separate being desperately seeking connection to God. You are the very expression of divinity itself, living and breathing in this moment through what appears to be your individual form. Just as the ocean expresses through countless waves, each unique yet never separate from the ocean itself, divinity expresses through all creation, and that includes you. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but as the actual substance and reality of your being right now. If what we explored today resonated with you, I'd love for you to join our community. Hit that subscribe button so you can continue this journey with us. This isn't just content, it's a path of genuine awakening. This isn't spiritual theory or philosophical speculation. This is the fundamental truth behind your existence, whether you've recognized it yet or not. The life force animating your body, the consciousness aware of these words right now, the intelligence orchestrating every cell in your being. This is divine expression in action. You've been looking for God outside yourself, while the entire time divine life has been expressing as your very existence. The impact of truly accepting this transforms not just your spiritual practice, but every decision you make, every relationship you have, every challenge you face. Everything shifts when you move from the mindset of separation to the recognition of oneness. If this is resonating with you, if something inside is saying, yes, this is true, write in the comments, I recognize my divine nature. When Jesus declared, I and my Father are one, most people throughout history have interpreted this as a special claim, something unique to him alone that separated him from the rest of humanity. But this misses the entire point of what he was revealing. He wasn't elevating himself above everyone else. He was unveiling a universal truth that applies to every single human being who has ever lived or will ever live. This oneness with the divine source isn't an achievement reserved for saints and mystics. It's not something you earn after decades of spiritual practice. It's the fundamental reality of your existence right now, in this very moment, whether you're aware of it or not. This is where the transformation in mindset becomes absolutely critical. Most spiritual paths teach you that oneness is a destination, something you work toward, a goal you might reach someday if you meditate enough, pray enough, become pure enough. But that entire framework keeps you locked in the consciousness of separation. It reinforces the very illusion you're trying to transcend. The hidden truth is that oneness isn't waiting for you at the end of some spiritual journey. It's the foundation upon which that journey is already happening. You're not trying to become one with God. You're recognizing that you've never been anything else. Let me share something that might shift your entire perspective on this. Imagine the vast ocean and the countless waves rising and falling on its surface. A wave isn't something separate from the ocean, desperately trying to become oceanic, is it? The wave already is ocean, just temporarily expressing in that particular form. The wave's entire substance, its very existence, is oceanic. It doesn't need to strive or struggle or earn the right to be ocean. It simply needs to recognize what it already is. And here's the revelation that changes everything. You are not a human being trying to reach God. You are divine life temporarily expressing in human form, just as the wave is ocean temporarily expressing in wave form. Behind the scenes of your human experience, beneath all the thoughts, emotions, personality traits, and life circumstances that seem to define you, there's this deeper reality. You are the divine expressing itself through this unique configuration of consciousness that appears as your individual life. The wave doesn't lose its identity by recognizing its ocean. It doesn't dissolve into nothingness. It simply understands its true nature while still experiencing the particular shape and movement of being that wave. This recognition doesn't erase your humanity. It reveals the divine foundation that makes your humanity possible. The impact of truly accepting this goes far beyond spiritual philosophy. It transforms every decision you make, every relationship you navigate, every challenge you face, because you're no longer approaching life from the limited perspective of separation. You're living from the recognition of what you actually are. If you've ever felt, even for a moment, that deeper connection beyond your individual self, type in the comments, I am the wave and the ocean. Joel Goldsmith, one of the great mystical teachers of the 20th century, discovered something profound that cuts right to the heart of human suffering. He taught that when you truly grasp your divine nature, you dissolve the root cause of all suffering in one fell swoop. And what is that root cause? It's the belief in separation. Think about it for a moment. Every anxiety you've ever experienced, every sense of lack, every fear, every moment of feeling lost or alone, all of it stems from this single misperception that you are somehow cut off from your source. This is the hidden truth behind why spiritual practice often feels like such a struggle. You're trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist, trying to bridge a gap that was never really there. The transformation that happens when you shift from the consciousness of separation to the recognition of oneness isn't subtle, it's total. When you live knowing that the divine isn't something outside you that you're trying to reach, but is actually your source and substance right now, everything about how you experience life changes. You're no longer operating from scarcity, no longer approaching each day wondering if you'll have enough, be enough, or receive what you need. That entire mindset dissolves because you recognize that what you've been seeking has been present all along, not as something separate from you, but as the very foundation of your being. Here's where the practical impact becomes undeniable. You stop approaching life like someone standing outside in the cold, begging to be let in. You stop praying as if addressing a distant deity who might or might not respond to your requests. Instead, something shifts in how you receive from life. It becomes natural, effortless, like breathing. You recognize that what you need is already present within the divine flow of your being. This isn't positive thinking or manifesting techniques. This is a fundamental shift in your relationship with existence itself. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a complete reversal in how you move through your days. Instead of struggling against the current of life, pushing and striving and exhausting yourself, trying to make things happen through sheer force of will, you start allowing. You start trusting, not in some distant power that might help you, but in the divine nature that's already expressing through you. The wave doesn't struggle to be ocean. It already is ocean. And when you recognize this truth about yourself, you stop fighting reality and start flowing with it. The decisions you make from this place of recognition are completely different from decisions made from fear and separation. Your entire journey transforms from one of desperate seeking to natural unfolding. Now, I want to show you what this looks like in the most practical everyday situations, because this isn't just philosophy. It's a lived reality that transforms how you approach everything from your relationships to your challenges, to your sense of purpose. If this shift from struggling to allowing resonates with you, write in the comments, "I'm ready to flow with life." When this recognition of your oneness with God truly takes root in your consciousness, your entire relationship with the divine undergoes a complete recalibration. And I mean complete. It's not a small adjustment or a slight improvement in how you pray or meditate. It's a fundamental shift in identity itself. Instead of viewing yourself as this separate little person, trying to connect with some vast, distant God, you begin to recognize yourself as an individualized expression of divine life itself. The boundary that seemed so solid, so real, between you and the divine, it starts to dissolve. Not because you're destroying it through effort, but because you're seeing through the illusion that it was ever really there in the first place. This is where people sometimes get confused, thinking this recognition is about inflating the ego or claiming some kind of special status that separates them from others. But it's actually the complete opposite. The ego is that separate sense of self that feels cut off and alone. When you recognize your true identity as divine expression, the ego doesn't get bigger. It gets seen through. You're not adding something to your limited self. You're recognizing what you are beyond that limited self. And here's the beautiful paradox. In recognizing your divine nature, you simultaneously recognize that same divine nature in everyone and everything around you. The wholeness you experience isn't something new that suddenly appeared. It's been present all along, just waiting for you to notice it. The impact of this recalibration shows up most clearly in how you pray. Consider the stark difference in these two approaches. Someone who still perceives God as distant and separate naturally prays from that mindset of separation. Please, God, help me with this problem. Please intervene. Please give me what I need. There's a desperation in that prayer, isn't there? An underlying anxiety that maybe God won't help, maybe you're not worthy, maybe your prayer won't be heard. That's the prayer of someone operating from the consciousness of lack and separation. If this video brought you clarity or sparked something within you, tap that like button. It helps this message reach others who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. But someone who has awakened to the truth of their oneness with God prays in a completely different way. Their prayer isn't about begging an external deity for intervention. It's about acknowledging what's already present. They recognize that divine wisdom isn't something distant they need to acquire or convince to help them. It's already present within as their true nature, as the very consciousness they're experiencing right now. This shift transforms prayer from a desperate plea into a powerful recognition. The entire energy changes. Instead of reaching outward with anxiety, you're acknowledging inward with confidence, not arrogance, but the natural confidence that comes from knowing your true source. This transformation in how you pray ripples out into every aspect of your spiritual life and beyond. The decisions you make, the way you approach challenges, the quality of your relationships, all of it shifts when you move from begging to recognition, from separation to oneness. If you've experienced that shift in how you pray, even once, write in the comments, prayer is recognition, not desperation. When you look at how Jesus approached healing, you discover something revolutionary about this principle of oneness in action. He never begged God to intervene from some distant heaven. He never pleaded for divine assistance as though it were separate from the situation at hand. Instead, he simply acknowledged divine presence right there, in that moment, with that person, in that circumstance. And what happened when divine presence was acknowledged? Wholeness naturally expressed, not because something broken was fixed, but because the wholeness that had always been present was finally recognized and allowed to reveal itself. This completely transforms how we understand healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. Most of us approach healing from the mindset that something is fundamentally broken and needs to be repaired. We see lack, limitation, disease, and we desperately seek solutions to fix what appears to be wrong. But the hidden truth behind Jesus' healing work was this: he wasn't fixing broken things. He was revealing the wholeness that was never actually lost, just obscured by the belief in separation. Where you see divine presence, you can't simultaneously see brokenness. The two perceptions can't coexist. This is why his healing work was so effortless, so natural. He wasn't struggling against disease. He was simply acknowledging reality. The impact of understanding this principle extends far beyond physical healing. It transforms your entire approach to every challenge, every problem, every apparent limitation in your life. You stop trying to fix yourself from a position of brokenness and start recognizing the wholeness that's been present all along, just waiting to be acknowledged. This shift in perspective is itself the healing, because healing isn't about changing reality. It's about seeing reality clearly for the first time. Now, here's where this understanding becomes incredibly practical and liberating. Divine resources, whether we're talking about peace, wisdom, abundance, creativity, strength, whatever quality you might feel you're lacking, these aren't things you need to hunt down or earn through years of spiritual effort. They're your inheritance. Think about how inheritance works. A child doesn't beg their parents for their genetic inheritance, does it? They don't have to prove themselves worthy of having their parents' eyes or their grandmother's talent for music. These things are naturally theirs through the simple fact of relationship, through the reality of where they came from. In exactly the same way, you have access to divine qualities through your essential connection to Source. Not because you've earned them, not because you've done enough spiritual practice, but because of what you actually are, divine expression in human form. When this recognition settles into your consciousness, your entire prayer life undergoes that transformation we talked about earlier. It shifts from begging into recognition, from anxious effort into restful knowing. You're no longer approaching God like someone standing outside hoping to receive charity. You're acknowledging what's already yours by the very nature of your being. The decisions you make from this consciousness of inheritance versus the decisions you make from scarcity consciousness are completely different. One comes from trust, the other from fear. One flows naturally, the other struggles. Constantly. If this idea of divine inheritance resonates with something deep inside you, type in the comments, "I claim my divine inheritance." When you pray from the recognition of your oneness with God, something fundamental shifts in what prayer actually is. You're not trying to get God to do something for you anymore. You're not attempting to convince divine power to intervene in your circumstances. You're simply remembering what is already true. Divine life isn't something that might flow to you if you pray correctly or believe hard enough. It's already flowing through you right now, animating every breath, every heartbeat, every thought. Divine wisdom isn't a distant quality you need to acquire through years of study and meditation. It's already present as your true mind, the consciousness that's aware of these words in this moment. Divine substance isn't separate from you, waiting to be attracted or manifested. It's already expressing as your very being. This remembering, this recognition is the secret that transforms everything. Behind the scenes of every authentic spiritual breakthrough is this simple shift from seeking to remembering, from trying to become something to acknowledging what already is. The journey stops being about reaching some distant goal and becomes about removing the veils of misperception that have hidden your true nature from yourself. And here's what makes this so powerful. The moment you truly remember who you are, everything starts shifting. In your actual everyday experience, this isn't just beautiful philosophy that sounds good but has no practical impact. This understanding creates tangible shifts in how you move through your daily life. Your sense of identity begins to expand beyond the limited personality you thought you were, beyond your name, your story, your past failures and successes, to include divine qualities as your true inheritance and actual nature. When this happens, healing starts occurring naturally, not because you've mastered some technique, but simply because you've remembered who you are. The transformation happens from the inside out. Think of it like this. Imagine a river that's been dammed up for years. The water's natural flow has been blocked, creating pressure and stagnation. What happens when you remove that dam? The water doesn't need to be taught how to flow. It doesn't need a manual or a technique. It simply returns to its natural state instantly. The flow was always there, just waiting for the obstruction to be removed. That's exactly what happens when you remove the mental barriers of separation. Divine qualities don't need to be created or acquired or earned. They express naturally through you because that's what you actually are when nothing's blocking the flow. The decisions you make from this expanded sense of identity are completely different from the decisions you make when you're identified solely with the limited personality. One comes from abundance and trust, the other from scarcity and fear. One flows effortlessly, the other exhausts you with constant effort. And the remarkable thing is, this shift can happen in an instant, the moment you truly accept your oneness with God. Now, I want to share something practical that can help anchor this recognition in your daily experience. Because understanding this intellectually is one thing, living it is another. If you're experiencing this shift in your own life right now, write in the comments, "I remember who I am." Here's what's crucial to understand about this journey of recognition. When you accept your oneness with God, the transformation begins immediately on the inside, but the outward manifestation follows a natural pattern that requires patience and trust. This is where many people get discouraged because they expect instant external results. But think about how a seed transforms into a plant. The moment that seed is placed in soil and receives water, profound changes begin happening. But they're happening beneath the surface, invisible to the eye. For days, sometimes weeks, nothing appears to be happening above ground. Yet underground, an entire transformation is taking place. Roots spreading, cellular structures forming, life force organizing itself. Your spiritual awakening follows this exact same natural rhythm. The recognition of your divine nature initiates an immediate inner transformation, a shift in consciousness that's real and powerful, even though you might not see external evidence right away. This is why focusing on cultivating the consciousness from which all authentic change emerges is so important. You're not trying to manipulate effects or force outcomes. You're living from cause, from the recognition of your true nature, and trusting that the outward manifestation will follow in divine timing rather than human expectation. Behind the scenes of every lasting transformation is this principle: inner creates outer, always. Consciousness shapes experience. When you truly change at the level of identity and understanding, your external circumstances must eventually reflect that change because they're expressions of your consciousness. The decisions you make from this understanding are no longer reactive attempts to fix problems at the effect level. They're flowing from a completely different source, from the recognition of divine life expressing through you. Now here's where everything we've been discussing comes together into a lived reality that transforms not just isolated moments, but your entire way of being in the world. When you truly accept that peace, wisdom, love, abundance, all these divine qualities aren't things you lack and must somehow acquire, but are actually your inheritance, your natural state as divine expression, everything shifts. This isn't about positive thinking or trying to convince yourself of something that isn't true. It's about recognizing what has always been true, but was obscured by the belief in separation. When this recognition becomes your living consciousness, not just an idea you think about occasionally, but the foundation from which you actually live, you stop operating from fear-based decisions. You know those decisions, the ones driven by anxiety about not having enough, not being protected or provided for. Those decisions come from separation consciousness. But when you're living from the recognition of your divine inheritance, your decisions flow from divine assurance instead. Not arrogance, but the natural confidence of knowing your true source and substance. The impact of this shift is that you no longer see yourself as a limited human personality desperately struggling to connect with some distant divinity. You recognize yourself as divine expression, temporarily experiencing human form. And from that recognition, everything, your relationships, your purpose, your challenges, your entire journey, takes on a completely different quality and meaning. If you're beginning to live from this recognition of your divine inheritance, write in the comments, "I choose divine assurance over fear." If you've made it this far in this video, I want to acknowledge something. You're not here by accident. This message found you because something inside you is ready for this shift, ready to accept the truth of your oneness with God. And that readiness is itself a sign that the transformation has already begun. I share these insights every week because I've witnessed how understanding this truth changes lives, including my own. If what we explored today resonated with you, if you felt something shift inside as we went through this journey together, I'd love for you to join our community. Hit that subscribe button so you can continue exploring these profound truths with us. This isn't just content, it's a path of genuine awakening, and having companions on this journey makes all the difference. And if you made it all the way to the end, let me know. By writing in the comments, "This message was meant for me," I read these comments, and it always moves me to see how many people are awakening to their true divine nature. Your presence here matters. If this video brought you clarity or sparked something within you, go ahead and tap that like button. It helps this message reach others who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. There are people out there right now feeling separate and struggling who need to hear this truth about their oneness with God. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper, exploring how to practically apply this recognition of divine oneness in your daily life, especially when facing challenges. Click and continue with me there. Let's keep this journey going together. Have you ever wondered why the most powerful statement Jesus ever made wasn't about love, forgiveness, or even salvation, but rather three simple words that shattered every religious and philosophical foundation of his time? When Jesus boldly declared, "Before Abraham was, I am," he wasn't just making a theological claim. He was revealing the most revolutionary secret about human consciousness that has been hidden in plain sight for over 2,000 years. Think about this for a moment. Here was a man standing before the religious authorities, facing potential death by stoning, and instead of backing down or explaining himself in safe, acceptable terms, he made a statement so audacious, so seemingly impossible, that it defied everything his listeners thought they knew about time, identity, and the nature of existence itself. But what if I told you that this wasn't arrogance or blasphemy? What if this declaration was actually the key to unlocking the same timeless awareness that exists within you right now? Has this ever happened to you? You're going through your daily routine, perhaps in a moment of quiet reflection or unexpected stillness, and suddenly you experience a profound sense of existing beyond your personal story, beyond your name, your history, your circumstances, as if touching something eternal within yourself that was never born and will never die. That fleeting glimpse is exactly what Jesus was pointing to when he spoke those revolutionary words. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The truth is, most of us have been conditioned to read Jesus' "I am" statement as either a claim of divinity exclusive to him or as some mystical riddle meant only for theologians to debate. But what you're about to discover might completely transform how you understand not just Jesus' words, but the very nature of your own consciousness and identity. This wasn't a statement about the past or even about Jesus himself. It was a direct pointing to a dimension of awareness that transcends all temporal boundaries, a state of being that exists before every story you've ever told yourself about who you are. When Jesus said, "Before Abraham was," he was speaking about something that exists prior to all human lineage, all historical timelines, all personal narratives. And when he declared, "I am," he wasn't referring to his personal identity as Jesus of Nazareth, but to the same timeless consciousness that beats your heart, breathes through your lungs, and is aware of these very words right now. Stay with me until the end of this exploration, because what we're about to uncover together will reveal how this ancient declaration holds the secret to awakening from the fundamental illusion that keeps most people feeling separated from their divine nature. The distance you sometimes feel between yourself and the sacred isn't a reality to overcome. It's an illusion that dissolves the moment you truly understand what Jesus meant when he spoke from that eternal "I am" that exists before all time. This revelation becomes even more profound when you understand that Jesus wasn't claiming something exclusive to himself when he declared his timeless "I am" nature. In John 10:34, he made another statement that religious institutions have often struggled to explain: "You are gods." This wasn't poetic language or a metaphorical expression. It was a direct recognition of the same eternal consciousness he embodied being present within every human being. Think about the transformative impact of this understanding. When Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am," he was pointing to a dimension of your being that exists before you took on your name, your story, your role in this world. Before you became a parent, a professional, a student, or whatever identity you currently hold, there was and is this timeless I am awareness that remains untouched by any human circumstance or limitation. This hidden truth explains something remarkable about Jesus' entire approach to life and spirituality. Have you ever noticed that throughout the Gospels, Jesus never begged? He never pleaded with God or desperately sought divine intervention from some distant source. His prayers weren't characterized by the anxious energy of someone trying to convince an external deity to help him. Instead, he spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who understood that the I am consciousness he embodied was already one with the creative force of existence itself. Behind the scenes of every miracle, every teaching, every moment of profound wisdom was this fundamental recognition. The same consciousness that existed before Abraham wasn't separate from the source of all creation. It was that source expressing through human awareness. This mindset shift changes everything about how we understand our relationship with the divine and our capacity for transformation in daily life. When you begin to grasp what before Abraham was, I am, truly means, your entire approach to prayer, to challenges, to seeking guidance undergoes a revolutionary change. Instead of positioning yourself as someone who needs to petition external forces for help, you begin to recognize that the same timeless awareness Jesus pointed to is already present within you as your deepest nature. The consciousness that was present before all human history, before all personal stories, before all sense of limitation. That's not something you need to become. That's what you already are beneath every layer of conditioning and learned identity. This journey of recognition doesn't require years of spiritual practice or complex theological study. It happens in moments of quiet acknowledgement when you touch that place within yourself that exists beyond your personal timeline, beyond your achievements and failures, beyond every role you've ever played. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what happens when this recognition begins to transform the very foundation of how you experience yourself and your relationship with existence itself. If you've ever felt a sense of your identity existing beyond your personal story, even for just a moment, write in the comments, "I've touched the timeless." The most revolutionary aspect of Jesus's "before Abraham was, I am" declaration is that he wasn't describing something you need to achieve, acquire, or even develop through years of spiritual discipline. He was pointing to what you already are at the deepest level of your being. This hidden truth challenges everything we've been taught about the spiritual journey and completely transforms our understanding of what authentic awakening actually involves. Most people approach spirituality with the underlying assumption that they need to somehow bridge a gap between their current human experience and some distant divine reality. This creates an endless cycle of spiritual seeking, always reaching for something that feels perpetually just beyond their grasp. But when Jesus spoke from that eternal I am consciousness, he was revealing that this timeless awareness isn't separate from you. It's the very foundation upon which your entire existence rests. Consider the profound impact this has on your daily spiritual practice. Behind the scenes of traditional religious approaches, there's often an energy of desperation, of pleading with external forces for intervention or assistance. This mindset keeps you positioned as someone fundamentally separate from divine source, always dependent on convincing God to help you from the outside. But the I am consciousness that existed before Abraham operates from a completely different paradigm. When you begin to touch this timeless awareness within yourself, something remarkable happens to how you approach prayer and spiritual connection. Instead of that familiar energy of, please help me, please change this situation, or please give me what I need, you find yourself naturally shifting into recognition. You're no longer trying to get God's attention or convince divine power to intervene. You're simply acknowledging what already exists in the eternal present moment where the I am awareness dwells. This transformation from spiritual seeking to spiritual recognition represents one of the most significant mindset shifts a person can experience. The decisions you make from this place of understanding create entirely different results than those made from a consciousness of separation and lack. Your entire relationship with challenges, opportunities, and daily circumstances begins to operate from the same foundation that Jesus demonstrated when he spoke with such unwavering certainty about his eternal nature. If these insights resonate with you, hit that subscribe button to continue exploring these transformative teachings together. The journey from desperately asking external forces for help to consciously recognizing the divine presence that's already complete within every moment doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen naturally when you understand what before Abraham was I am actually points to in your own experience. This isn't about adopting new beliefs or following complex spiritual techniques. It's about discovering what was never actually hidden in the first place. Now, I want to explore what happens when this recognition becomes more than just an intellectual understanding and begins to transform the actual fabric of how you experience reality on a moment-by-moment basis. If you've noticed a shift in how you approach prayer or spiritual connection, even in small ways, write in the comments. Recognition feels different. What makes this understanding so transformative is the complete shift it creates in how you see your fundamental relationship with existence itself. For most of your life, you've probably operated from the underlying assumption that you're essentially a cosmic orphan, a separate human being desperately trying to establish some kind of connection with a divine source that exists somewhere out there. This creates a constant sense of spiritual homelessness, always seeking but never quite finding the lasting connection you're looking for. But Jesus's "before Abraham was, I am" declaration reveals something that changes everything about this search. You're not a separate entity trying to reach divinity. You are divine consciousness temporarily expressing through human form. The same timeless awareness that Jesus pointed to when he spoke those profound words is the very consciousness that's reading these words right now, thinking these thoughts, breathing this breath. This isn't philosophical theory. This is the hidden truth behind your actual existence. The impact of this revelation on your daily experience cannot be overstated. When you begin to recognize that you're not seeking connection with divine source, but actually are divine source, expressing uniquely through your individual human experience, every aspect of your spiritual journey transforms. The decisions you make, the way you handle challenges, the manner in which you relate to others, everything shifts from the energy of lack and separation to the recognition of inherent wholeness and connection. Behind the scenes of Jesus' entire ministry was this fundamental understanding. He wasn't trying to establish a religion where people would worship him as someone separate and superior. Every teaching, every interaction, every demonstration of divine consciousness was an invitation for others to recognize the same timeless awareness within themselves. When he embodied the I am consciousness, he was showing what becomes possible when a human being fully awakens to their true nature beyond all personal history and conditioning. This recognition doesn't make you arrogant or separate you from humanity. Instead, It connects you more deeply with all life by revealing the same divine essence expressing through everyone and everything. The I Am consciousness that existed before Abraham isn't exclusive to Jesus. It's the universal awareness that animates all existence, including your own moment-by-moment experience. The journey of awakening to this truth isn't about acquiring special knowledge or developing supernatural abilities. It's about removing the layers of misperception that have obscured what was always present. When you truly understand what Jesus meant by his timeless declaration, you realize that the spiritual path isn't about becoming something you're not, but about recognizing what you've always been beneath every story you've told yourself about limitation and separation. Now I want to explore how this recognition practically transforms the way you experience challenges and opportunities in everyday life, revealing the profound difference between living from human limitation and expressing from divine consciousness. If you're beginning to sense that you might be more than just your personal story and circumstances, write in the comments, "I am divine expression." When Jesus declared, "I and my Father are one," he was speaking from the same timeless I Am consciousness that existed before Abraham. This wasn't a claim of special status or exclusive relationship. It was a revelation of the universal truth that applies to every human being. The oneness he described flows directly from understanding what the eternal I Am actually represents. The universal consciousness that you share, the same divine awareness that preceded your personal story and will continue beyond it. This profound revelation becomes clearer when you consider a simple but powerful metaphor. Imagine standing by the ocean, watching the waves rise and fall. Each wave appears unique, with its own form, size, and movement. Yet every wave is nothing other than ocean itself expressing temporarily in wave form. The wave doesn't spend its existence trying to become oceanic. It already is ocean, simply manifesting as a particular expression of the infinite body of water. This is exactly what Jesus was pointing to with his "before Abraham was, I am" declaration. You are not a separate human being striving to become divine. You are divine consciousness temporarily expressing in human form, just as the wave is ocean temporarily expressing as a unique formation. The substance of your being, your awareness, your very existence, is not separate from the infinite I Am consciousness any more than a wave is separate from the ocean. Behind the scenes of this understanding lies a transformation that impacts every decision you make, every challenge you face, and every relationship you experience. When you recognize that the oneness Jesus described isn't something to achieve through years of spiritual practice, but the very foundation of your existence right now, everything changes. Your approach to life's difficulties shifts from the mindset of a limited human seeking external help to the recognition of divine consciousness expressing through temporary human circumstances. The journey from separation consciousness to oneness recognition doesn't require you to become something other than what you already are. Just as a wave never needs to acquire oceanness, it simply needs to recognize its essential nature. You don't need to become divine. The I Am awareness that Jesus embodied when he spoke those revolutionary words is already present as your deepest identity. The consciousness that exists before every thought, every emotion, every story you tell yourself about who you are. This recognition creates a fundamental mindset shift that affects how you navigate every aspect of human experience. When challenges arise, instead of approaching them from the perspective of limitation and lack, you begin to meet them from the same consciousness that could declare its eternal nature with such unwavering certainty. Now, I want to explore what happens when this recognition of your inherent oneness with divine consciousness begins to transform the most practical aspects of your daily spiritual practice, particularly in how you approach moments of prayer and inner connection. If this understanding of your true nature as divine consciousness expressing in human form resonates with you, write in the comments, "I am the ocean in wave form." When this understanding of your essential oneness with divine consciousness begins to permeate your daily spiritual practice, something profound happens to the very nature of prayer itself. Instead of approaching prayer as a petition, asking, pleading, or trying to convince an external deity to intervene in your circumstances, prayer transforms into something entirely different, pure recognition of what already exists in the eternal now. Think about what this means practically. When Jesus spoke from the "before Abraham was, I am" consciousness, he was pointing to a timeless state where all divine qualities already exist: peace, wisdom, love, abundance, healing. These aren't distant gifts waiting to be granted by some external source. They're already present in the eternal I am moment, the same consciousness that you access whenever you touch that place within yourself that exists beyond your personal timeline and story. This revelation creates a complete transformation in how you approach moments of spiritual connection. Behind the scenes of traditional prayer lies an underlying assumption of separation, the belief that you're reaching across some cosmic distance to connect with divine power that exists apart from you. But from the I am consciousness, prayer becomes a moment of acknowledging what's already present, recognizing the divine reality that exists right here, right now, as the very foundation of your being. One of the great mystical teachers, Joel Goldsmith, understood this principle deeply. He taught that recognizing your inherent divine nature dissolves the root cause of all human suffering, the belief in separation from divine source. When you truly grasp that the same consciousness Jesus referred to as existing before Abraham is your own timeless nature, the sense of being disconnected from God completely dissolves. This isn't spiritual theory or wishful thinking. It's the fundamental reality behind your existence that changes everything about how you experience life's challenges and opportunities. The impact of this recognition goes far beyond philosophical understanding. It affects the decisions you make, the way you handle stress, the manner in which you relate to others, and how you navigate every aspect of human experience. When you pray from the I am, a consciousness, you're not trying to get something from outside yourself. You're simply allowing your awareness to rest in the truth of what already is, in the eternal present, where all divine qualities naturally exist. This journey from petition to recognition represents one of the most significant mindset shifts possible in spiritual development. Instead of positioning yourself as someone who lacks divine connection and needs to convince external forces to help you, you begin to operate from the recognition that the same timeless awareness Jesus embodied is already present as your deepest identity. Now, I want to explore how this recognition of your inherent divine nature creates tangible transformations in how you experience healing, abundance, and harmonious relationships in everyday life. If you've noticed a difference between asking for something and simply recognizing what's already present, write in the comments. Recognition changes everything. The difference between these two approaches to prayer represents a complete revolution in consciousness that affects every area of your life. When someone operates from the belief that divinity is separate and distant, their entire spiritual practice carries the energy of desperation and lack. They approach prayer with phrases like, "Please God, help me with this problem," or "I need you to fix this situation for me." While sincere, this mindset reinforces the very separation that creates suffering in the first place. But When you begin to understand what Jesus meant by "before Abraham was, I am," your prayer consciousness undergoes a profound transformation. You're no longer reaching across some cosmic distance trying to get God's attention. Instead, you're acknowledging the divine presence that already exists right here, right now, as the very essence of your being. This shift from desperate pleading to conscious recognition changes not just your words, but the entire energy and effectiveness of your spiritual. In practice, this principle becomes crystal clear when you examine how Jesus approached healing throughout his ministry. He never operated from the mindset of someone trying to convince a distant God to intervene in human problems. Instead, he consistently demonstrated what it looks like when someone recognizes divine presence as already complete in every situation. Behind the scenes of every healing was this fundamental recognition: the eternal reality that existed before Abraham was present, right there beneath all appearances of limitation, lack, or disease. Jesus saw beyond the surface story of human problems to the timeless truth that was always present but often obscured by beliefs in separation. This wasn't miraculous in the way most people think of miracles, as supernatural interventions from outside the natural order. It was the natural result of consciousness aligned with the I am awareness that recognizes wholeness as the fundamental reality beneath all temporary appearances. The impact of this understanding on your own experience cannot be overstated. When you begin to approach life's challenges from this level of consciousness, you discover that the same recognition is available to you. Whether you're facing health issues, financial concerns, relationship difficulties, or any other human challenge, you have access to the same I am awareness that operates from divine completeness rather than human limitation. This journey of transformation doesn't require you to deny the reality of human problems or pretend that challenges don't exist. Instead, it invites you to see through them to the eternal reality that was present before any temporary situation arose. When you touch this timeless awareness within yourself, you naturally begin to operate from wholeness rather than lack, from divine assurance rather than human anxiety. Now, I want to explore how this recognition creates tangible changes in your daily experience, revealing the practical difference between living from human limitation and expressing from the consciousness Jesus embodied. If you've experienced moments where recognizing something deeper transformed a situation, write in the comments. Deeper sight changes things. When this recognition of your inherent I am nature becomes more than just an intellectual understanding and starts to permeate your daily consciousness, something remarkable happens. You begin to experience tangible shifts in your everyday reality that demonstrate the practical power of living from the same awareness Jesus embodied when he declared his eternal existence. These changes aren't the result of manipulating external circumstances or applying special techniques. They flow naturally from removing the mental barriers that have obscured your divine nature. Think about what happens when you remove a dam from a flowing river. The water doesn't need to be taught how to flow. It simply returns to its natural state. Similarly, when you remove the beliefs in separation and limitation that have blocked your recognition of the I am consciousness, divine qualities begin expressing through you as your authentic state of being. Healing, abundance, harmonious relationships, and inner peace start manifesting not because you've acquired something new, but because you've remembered what was always true. This transformation affects the decisions you make, the energy you bring to challenges, and how you naturally respond to life's inevitable ups and downs. Behind the scenes of this shift is a fundamental change in identity. You're no longer operating as someone who occasionally has spiritual experiences. You're recognizing yourself as spiritual consciousness, temporarily having human experiences. This isn't about becoming superhuman or denying the reality of human circumstances. It's about approaching those circumstances from the timeless awareness that exists before all temporary situations. The journey from human struggling to divine expression represents the most profound mindset revolution possible. When you truly understand what Jesus meant by "before Abraham was, I am," your entire experience transforms from being a limited human, desperately trying to connect with distant divinity, into recognizing yourself as divine consciousness expressing through temporary human form. Life's challenges don't disappear, but your relationship with them completely changes. Instead of meeting difficulties from a place of fear, lack, or limitation, you begin to approach them from the eternal I am perspective, the same consciousness that could declare its timeless nature with such unshakable certainty. This shift doesn't require years of spiritual practice or complex techniques. It happens naturally when you touch that place within yourself that existed before your personal story began and will continue after it ends. The impact of this recognition creates a ripple effect throughout every aspect of your experience. Relationships become more harmonious because you're no longer approaching others from a place of need or desperation. Work and creative endeavors flow more naturally because you're expressing from divine abundance rather than human limitation. Even mundane daily activities take on a different quality when approached from the consciousness of your eternal nature. Now, I want to share a simple but powerful practice that can help anchor this recognition in your daily awareness, making the transition from intellectual understanding to lived experience. If you're beginning to sense that your challenges might be opportunities to express from divine consciousness rather than human limitation, write in the comments, "I'm ready to express divinity." If you've stayed with me through this entire exploration of what Jesus truly meant when he declared, "Before Abraham was, I am," then you understand something profound about your own eternal nature that most people never discover. This recognition of your inherent divine consciousness isn't just beautiful spiritual theory. It's the foundation for a completely transformed way of experiencing life itself. The journey we've shared today represents just the beginning of understanding how this timeless awareness can reshape every aspect of your daily experience. If you found value in exploring these deeper truths that have been hidden in plain sight for centuries, I'd love to have you become part of our community here. Hit that subscribe button because we dive into these life-changing revelations every week, uncovering what spiritual masters actually taught versus what tradition has often obscured. And if you made it all the way to this moment, recognizing something stirring within you as we explored the eternal I am consciousness, let me know by commenting, "This message awakened something in me." There's something powerful about acknowledging when truth resonates at the deepest level, and I always love connecting with those who are ready to move beyond surface spirituality into authentic recognition. If this exploration created that sense of recognition we've been talking about, that feeling of remembering rather than learning something new, a gentle tap on the like button helps others who are seeking exactly this understanding find their way here. There's a video right here that takes this recognition even deeper, exploring how to live from this I am consciousness in practical everyday situations. Click and continue with me there as we discover what it truly means to express divine awareness through human experience, moving from understanding to embodiment of these eternal truths.